Hello and welcome to our presentation. Today we want to talk about the shopping behavior of Americans with you. We want to set the focus on clothing and on online shopping because it's a very current topic at these days, especially in times of COVID and the digitalization. First of all, I have a question for you. I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you bought something online? Take a few seconds, let that sink in, and think about it. Then I want you to ask yourself again, have you ever bought something you didn't end up using? I assume that your answer to the last question is yes, because everybody does that, at least from time to time. Buy things that you don't even need in the end. And that is our topic today. Why do we love to shop? What explains the endless desire for new things? What are the pros and the cons of online shopping? And how does our constant consumption actually affect our environment? And in the end, we want to discuss if there's anything we can do against it. Let's start with a few numbers, facts, and statistics I researched to give you a little insight into the topic. Take a look at this mind map. On the right side of this map, there is information that describes typical American shopping behavior, and on the left side, however, we have facts that relate a little more to the environment. So let's start at 12 o'clock. A survey found out that 9 out of 10 shoppers rarely or never return online purchases. And part of this is because things are so cheap today that you think, is it really worth $5 of my time to print out a label, go to the post office and send it back? Or is it just easier to keep it and use it eventually? So it's the laziness of people. Another shocking fact is that 18 million people of the American population are affected by online shopping addiction. And this again leads to another fact, namely that Americans have spent in 2020 $431 billion online, which is insane. And of course, it's no wonder that 30% of the US citizens have fallen already into debt because of online shopping. According to a statistic, the average American purchases 66 new garments each year, which is also like crazy because I don't even think I own 66 garments in my closet. So it is definitely obvious that online shopping is becoming more and more important to people. Americans spend 20% more on online shopping in 2020 than back in the year 2000. Now, I would like to touch on the subject environment, but just very briefly, because Flo is going to tell you a little bit more about it later. The so called Earth Organization found out that the chemicals that are applied to the fabric of our clothes are responsible for 20% of the global water emission. The production of clothing not only pollutes the water but also requires a huge amount of water. For example, you need round about 20,000 liters of water to produce just 1 kilogram of cotton. Remember the fact that Americans buy 66 new garments each year? A study found out that a piece of clothing will be worn just 7 times by the average American before it's getting tossed. So just imagine the amount of garbage that is being produced only by that. And even if someone is not too lazy to return an online purchase, it has been found out that in the year 2020, an amount of 2.6 million tons of returned clothing ended up in landfills because it is way cheaper to throw them away instead of recycling them. And our last point of this brief overview is that 20% of the produced clothing for online shops is never even sold. After this brief overview of statistics, you might have seen how much Americans, or people in general, are obsessed with shopping and spending money online. But why is shopping, especially online shopping, such a thing today? So, we all know plenty of reasons why online shopping is so successful these days, especially for our generation. But what is very interesting is that there are some biological reasons for online shopping. So it's a common known fact in the area of psychology or medicine that the brain releases the hormone dopamine when you buy something. Everybody does know that feeling. You buy a new pair of shoes or of jeans or whatever, and there's this little glimpse of joy coming up like, whoo, I got something new. But this is not the answer to the question why online shopping is so successful. Because why should you buy something online when you can get those dopamine hits at a local store? And that is the thing. The scientist Robert Sapolsky discovered the fact that it is not the actual purchase that causes dopamine to be released, but rather the anticipation of the product. And that is what happens if you buy things online. I mean, you have to wait for them. So instead of just getting one dopamine hit, you get two: one for the anticipation of your order, and another, actually smaller one, when your order arrives. So there is another general reason why we like to shop, and this reason has been ingrained in our roots for hundreds of thousands of years. There is an evolutionary aspect when it comes to shopping, because it always has been important to own as many things as possible. I mean, just let us look back a few thousand years. The people who had the most stuff were most likely to survive. For example, you try to gather enough food for the winter, or you try to gather a lot of wood for your shelter, according to the motto, more is more. And this is something that we feel safe with. The quest for possession continues to these days, only there are now other things that we strive for. Buying or owning things has never been easier than it is today. You can buy as much as you can, as fast as you can, because of the internet. But that is something Rukiye is going to talk about: the pros and the cons of online shopping.
Now I'd like to present you the pros and cons of online shopping. The biggest pro of online shopping is that you are able to shop from home or even anywhere you'd like to, as long as you have access to the internet. This directly leads us to the next point, that online shopping is easily accessible, since we nowadays have access to the internet almost everywhere. You can also shop anytime you want to, since there aren't limited hours, because online shops obviously don't close. You also don't have to wait on checkout lines, nor do you have to search for the right size or color for hours in the shop, because online is all done with just one click, and you can view all the available colors and sizes. Online shopping also releases more dopamine. You even get like 2 shots of dopamine, the first when you put your order, and the second, which is the bigger one, when a package arrives. It's bigger because of the anticipation of waiting for your package. Online shopping also provides more privacy in that sense that people around you, don't necessarily see what you are buying and where you are shopping, which sometimes can save you from embarrassing conversations. Needless to say, online shopping comes with a variety of cons, since it has impacts on the environment. While online shopping provides us more privacy, it can also quickly lead to scam or fraud. It's easier to access your bank data online, and with one click, all the data can be transferred to hackers. So you always have to make sure that you shop on a verified website. Since online shopping is easier and sometimes even cheaper, it leads to excessive consume, which then again leads to a shopping addiction, because the more we buy stuff online, the more dopamine we release, and the more often this happens, people get addicted to that feeling and get caught in a never-ending cycle. This also results in purchases we don't even need, and therefore this leads to waste. This excessive consume also leads to lower quality products. The demand rises insanely fast, so the producer has to produce more product in less time, and the quality automatically drops. All these points together lead to the pollution of the environment.
Okay, we have now heard quite a lot of information and facts about shopping behavior, and I'll tie in with that and talk about the associated impact on the environment. Okay, firstly, more than 82.2 million tons of packaging are thrown out yearly. And that being said, packaging accounts for over a quarter of the municipal solid waste in the United States. And it may be to protect what you're purchasing or to wrap it for individual sale, but nonetheless, while containers are frequently recycled, over 45% still end up in landfills or gets incinerated. And to give you some more context, I found an interesting study which stated that in the year 2017, a group of scientists set out to determine how much plastic had been manufactured to date and what ended up happening to those plastics. And the results were horrifying. They determined that out of 8,300 million metric tons, only 9% was recycled, which is more than what I would have guessed, but 12% was incinerated and 79% ended up in landfills or in the natural environment, if you can say so, being the beach or ocean. And the scientists noted that packaging is responsible for most plastic waste, and if our current trend continues, more than 12 billion metric tons of plastic will be accumulated in landfills and the beach, or rather ocean, by the year 2050. I wish I'd be lying, but I'm not. It seems to take 8,000 liters of water to make a single pair of jeans. The process of growing cotton and producing wearable jeans from that very cotton uses nearly 8,000 liters of water, and that's the equivalent carbon emission to driving about 120 kilometers per hour. And that just sounds as wrong as the headline itself. To make things worse, India is the top producer of cotton, but more than 100 million people do not have access to clean water to drink in India. This slide right here is the result of an old homework assignment of mine in the subject of health. And since India is the largest cotton supplier and producer, countless people suffer from adverse working conditions. It all started when Bayer developed a pesticide that was very carcinogenic on contact. Because of this, it was banned in Europe. But Bayer is not stupid, unfortunately not. They've been saying for years that they still have so many leftovers that they can't get rid of. So, as a result, it has been agreed on that this product will be sold abroad so cheaply that it's the only insect repellent that the poor farmers in India can afford. Most of the farmers in India cannot speak English, let alone read it. Therefore, they ignore the named health risks that emanate from the pesticides. Then the cotton is treated with other carcinogenic chemicals like azio dye to get a nice shade in color onto the cotton. The cotton is then transported to Europe and treated again with pesticide during the flight or the train route. And once the product has arrived in Europe, a random sample is taken. And it should be noted that only a very few cotton samples are tested. And incidentally, corruption and looking the other way are very present here. There are about 150 forbidden chemicals on a so-called Restriktionsliste. And all other chemicals, no matter how harmful they are allowed. If a hit occurs, the whole delivery must be returned and it must be published. Last but not least, one garbage truck of clothes is burned or sent to landfills every second, and most of it is still wearable. The question, how many outfits a woman need? In the 1930s, the answer was 9, but now the average woman owns about 30 outfits. Do you guys own 30 outfits? I certainly do not. But I get it, I guess it can be expensive keeping up with the fashion trends which are so-called fast fashion like Forever 21 and H&M does so well. They can offer current merchandise at a considerably discounted price simply because it's not made to last. The result? Over 53 million tons of clothing is produced yearly, and 73% will end up in the landfill or incinerated just after 7 to 10 wears.
Now to the possible solutions. Right now there are many new lifestyles and movements that try to make more out of less, like minimalism, for example, which is to basically live with as little as possible, or zero waste households, which encourages people to reuse the stuff at home instead of buying new things, or encourages people to reduce plastic usage. Another thing that is totally in right now are the capsule wardrobes. It is small and has no doors whatsoever. This is to motivate you to only get as much clothing as you can fit into them. Another thing to consider is buying reusable products so that your clothing can be reused for new clothing or materials. You can also buy sustainable clothing, which also support fair work conditions. This often is more expensive than the fast fashion products, so if you can't afford them, you could try to buy second-hand. You can even donate your own clothing to second-hand shops and give them another chance to be worn by someone else who'd like to have them. Also try not to impulse shop. This can happen easily when you go on a shopping website when sad or bored. This approach just leads to dopamine. But do your wallet and environment a favor by not buying it and look for healthy hobbies and coping mechanisms instead. This one shouldn't even be listed on here, but buying things you really need. So yeah, this means exactly what it says, but it's a really important point. We shouldn't buy something just because it's cheap or because it's a trend right now. If we won't use it at all or use it just for a few times. Things we purchase should be used for a longer period so that we don't have to shop that often. And this was our presentation. On the next slide you can see our sources. Thank you for listening. We wish you a happy Christmas and a happy New Year.